Just give me a little thumbs up whenever it's... All right, welcome everyone. This is our 11th Remix NYC Meetup. I'm very excited that we kind of have a theme that came together for this one. Yeah. So this is Let's Get Accessible, the remix, of course. Does anybody get like the reference that I tried to do, or am I just old? No? Yeah. I was going to put like from the Olivia Newton-John stuff, I was going to like put some GIFs on there, but as it turns out, not work appropriate. So moving on. Welcome everyone. I'm Adrian Howard. I'm a developer advocate here at Cockroach Labs. Also one of your organizers, along with Quentin and Steven manning the live stream. So if you have any questions, need anything, come find us. We always like to kick off the meetup with our code of conduct. This is adapted from the Remix Conf code of conduct. This is kind of the short version. There's a longer version that you can find on the website. But the TLDR is don't be a jerk, and we ask you to actively be nice to everyone. So we want to make this a welcoming community for everyone. If you have any problems, somebody's violating the code of conduct, please reach out to one of the organizers. We want to take a moment to talk about the community stuff that we have. So Remix has a Discord. This is the address for it. And if you want to find our channel, it's under the Meetups group. And we are just simply #NYC. Something new that's kind of popped up, or I guess resurrected kind of, Jacob Paris, who, if you've done anything with Remix and Googled for how to do something, you've probably come across his blog, has just taken over Molton, which is the monthly email newsletter. So it's a pretty great newsletter for Remix information. You see blog posts from Jacob, from Sergio, from Alum, like all the big names. But it's a great kind of recap of like what's gone on in the month. So there's that. We have a YouTube channel. We're streaming right now. So hello, Internet. You can find past meetup recordings and streams. Like and subscribe, all of that stuff. As always, we are looking for speakers. We're looking for sponsors. So if you want to, to be the person that calls Domino's or your food of choice, check that out. If you have something you'd like to talk about, we are not just doing things around Remix, but kind of the broader ecosystem of web development. So tonight we're doing accessibility, which is very important. But if you have something with like React or something as important as accessibility, that's kind of like a framework around it, we welcome your talks. And yes, I changed out some of the GIFs here. So our next meetup, we aim for the third Wednesday of every month. So that makes the next one October 18th. I believe we're still looking for speakers. Yeah, okay. And we're always open to a sponsor. Cockroach Labs gives us this wonderful space. They also bought the pizza tonight, but we're happy to share. And the more people who come up and speak, that's the less that I have to be up here doing it. So. And now to the sponsors. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Cockroach DB, for providing this space. It's lovely outside, so we can actually enjoy the roof deck. So that's nice. And here comes my slide. So Cockroach DB, we like to say we're the most highly evolved database on the planet. We scale fast. We survive anything. We thrive anywhere, just like a cockroach. We're Postgres compatible, so I think that makes a lot of sense for this community. So if you use Node Postgres, Prisma, or any other favorite Postgres library, I was recently trying Postgres.js with Drizzle, and it works. So there you go. And you can start for free. So we've got a serverless database. We can make it multi-region, but it's a pretty nice one to try out. We just brought it to hackathons. People are using it in their side project, but we worry about the database, so you don't have to. These are different QR codes that go to different links. They're all tagged with this meetup, so any of those that you use, we get credit. so we can continue doing this wonderful stuff. But we've got signing up for your free CockroachDB serverless account. If you want to learn more about CockroachDB or relational databases in general, we have free online courses through Cockroach University. And then something that I think is really cool is we have our own definitive guide. It's got a cockroach on it, and it tells you everything about the database. So we are a distributed SQL database. So that's all of that. But I thought I would ask a couple questions, not about actual cockroaches this time, because I lost that link, but we'll come up with more facts. But I have a couple questions, and they're CockroachDB related. So first, I was at Hack the North at the University of Waterloo over the weekend. The winning team, closest without going over, how many tables were in their database? It's an integer. Right on the nose. There were 5 tables, which if you knew anything about college level hackathons, that's amazing. So we have a hex bug for you. If you have, oh, come over here and grab it. If you have a cat or a dog, it's just a really fun time. Okay, second question. CockroachDB supports streaming data. What is the name of that feature? The initials or the name will work. I know this is probably a little harder one. Next question. What? Roach call. I wish. We do use a lot of roach puns, but yeah. Okay. So CockroachDB is a distributed database. That means that it can survive nodes failing. What is the minimum number of nodes you have to have for it to be able to survive one going down? Who said it first? Yep. 3. So our default replication factor is 3. As long as you have a cluster of 3 nodes, we can survive one going down. If the node comes back up, it will self-heal itself and go on. So we'll hand you this here in a minute. I too winded to run to the back. All right, so that was CockroachDB. Use it, love it, tell me about it. Now we have a time that we call quick pitches, and we do have some mics. So if you are hiring, if you're looking for a job, if you have a project or library that you want to share, you need collaborators, anything, now is your time. Do we have anyone with a pitch? Yes. Go, Quentin, go. This is where Quentin gets to be the ball boy at the tennis matches. Just runs back and forth.
Hello. Yeah, so hi guys, my name is Jeet Mehta. I'm a Stevens Masters in Computer Science student, and I'm looking for full-time roles. I am very well versed with the MERN stack, so I'm well versed with MongoDB, I'm sorry. And then all of the Express, Node, and React. Thank you so much.
You know, it's just as easy to make that a CERN stack. Anyone else?
Thank you. Oh, hey everyone, I'm Kyle Slug Urbino. I am also a full stack developer. I've been working independently since about March, primarily on sort of geospatial work in variously, Python, TypeScript, and Rust. I'm currently looking to go in-house somewhere. I gravitate toward the back end, but anything is sort of interest at this point. I'm sort of casting a wide net for opportunities. Let me know if anything comes across your desk. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Raymond. I'm a full stack developer. About 5 years experience building websites and web apps. My stack is Java and on the back end, and JavaScript with React on the front end. I try to hone my skills in both the back and front end, but I do lean a bit more to the back end. I'm also excited about learning any new technologies and using any new technologies such as AI. So if anybody's looking for a full stack engineer, give me a shout.
Awesome.
Hey, my name's Yuri Salima, a full stack developer. I maintain a library called Liquid for making interactive videos with React. So it's got integrations with 3JS, CodeMirror. Currently working on an integration with TL Draw, which is an open source infinite canvas whiteboard. So if anyone's interested in like tutorials, ed tech, interactivity kind of stuff, or visualizations, just love to chat.
Very cool. Liquid.
Hello, my name is Ilya, cloud architect with 10 years of experience, DevOps, SRE, web development as well. In my free time, I'm mulling over some startup ideas. So if you're interested in collaborating on some AI startups, ping me, let me know. Thank you.
Awesome. We got. It's like everybody at home just gets to like watch me react.
Hi guys, my name is Shivam. I'm a first year master student at Columbia Engineering. I'm doing my master's in computer engineering, and I have had around 2 years of full-time internship experience in web development, mainly front end. I have used Remix. I was talking to somebody and I started using it the next week it got open sourced. And I want to know about how Shopify integration got better after Shopify took over Remix, because when I did it, it was very pain in the ass. I was really pain. And I am yet looking for summer opportunities for internships as web developer. And I also do cloud. So cloud and web opportunities. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody? All right. So that leads us to our first speaker. So we've got Dylan, who is, I'm trying to remember because we're not switching computers, but he is a data engineer by day, a co-founder by night, or founder, co-founder, founder, doing it all. For JavaScript instruments, but let me quickly switch over to his talk, and everybody please welcome Dylan. So the camera is like right here. Oh, it is. Yeah. So I didn't stay around.
Okay, no worries. All right. So thank you all for joining me today. Today I'm going to be giving a talk about accessibility in Remix, basically talking about modern compliance or conformance for websites and applications. So the premise is that now more than ever, developers out there need to understand sort of the accessibility concerns that individuals have. And I'm going to be getting into the backdrop about that in a moment. So if it's okay if I can walk you through the agenda very quickly. First, I'm going to give an about me, about my partner for the event, who's a lawyer in Texas who specializes in this space, and then about for my agency that I'm a founder of. And then I'll be getting into the who, what, and why for accessibility on the web. And then I'll be branching into the accessibility statement, how to create an accessibility statement for your projects or your clients. If any of you have agencies, I know you talked about you were a freelancer, so this could be good for you. And then I'm going to get into the code examples on some of my projects in Remix. So here's a work sample for a project I'm currently working on. It's a mobile app for a streetwear brand that used to have a presence in New York City. They're currently based in Connecticut. It's a React Native build that integrates with Shopify, and I think it's pretty cool. So my company, JavaScript Instruments, focuses on 4 main verticals. The first of which is e-commerce. So for e-commerce brand owners that are interested in developing platforms, we help support them. And then, we get into startups who are looking to build prototypes, more specifically on mobile, service industry professionals, and we help businesses automate. And here's a little bit about me. As Adrian mentioned, I'm a data engineer, but I focus on Snowflake. for my day job because it's what I'm quite proficient at, what I'm good at, and my agency JavaScript Instruments is more of my passions, where my passions meet. I initially learned React before I got into Snowflake and data engineering. Some of my hobbies are practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and going on hikes. And here's the about for my partner, Chris, whom I'm partnering with for this event. He is a lawyer by day, and he is also an entrepreneur who runs an initiative called accessible.org. In addition to this, he's the author of the ADA book, which is a book that I got into reading a little bit earlier this year when I was looking to become more knowledgeable in this space and get to starting this agency. Now we'll get into the who, what, and why. So the W3C is an international community, a non-for-profit that helps create the guidelines and distribute the rules or best practices in this space. There are currently several different installments of WCAG, which are the name of the guidelines. The first of which has about 61 success criteria, and the second has 17, and the last has 9. They're broken up into 3 tiers. So the first tier, which would be single A, the second would be double A, and the third would be triple A, which is almost perfect compliance. But the standard that we aim for in this space is double A compliance. You can scan this QR code here or reach out to me for my presentation after to receive a link. So this is the most important section for me. It's sort of the why, 61 success criteria is a lot, and, it can kind of be a pain in the ass to implement. So you want to know why you're going to go through the trouble of kind of focusing on it in the first place. The first thing for me was I like, making websites that not only look really nice and along with mobile apps, but I want ones that are fast and then ones that everyone could use. So I thought this was a really interesting space for me to kind of cut my teeth and learn. And the second most important aspect of this would be kind of the legality of it all. New York City is notoriously litigious for lawsuits in this space, especially if you own an e-commerce brand like the one I showed. And now I'm going to get into the 4 principles of accessibility, following the acronym POUR, the first of which is perceivable. So individuals have to be able to see and enjoy your content in its fullness. It has to be operable, which means that they have to be able to navigate within its various facets and pages. And it needs to be understandable. So they need to be able to comprehend what's going on. And lastly, it needs to be robust. So it needs to be comprehended and interpreted by all sorts of systems that might be traversing your site. So some of the best practices for compliance, one of which I mentioned earlier, which is to aim for AA. You want to be focusing on the latest installment and looking to kind of arm your site with AA compliance. And then posting an accessibility statement is one of the easiest ones for me to follow because, you just kind of have to make a link and put it in your footer, make a new page. And you can use W3C's accessibility statement generator tool in order to do it. It takes like 10 minutes. And lastly, you have to respond to people's requests genuinely when they want you to make some changes to make your site more accessible for them. So now we're getting into the statement portion, which is relatively short. There are 3 main things that you need for an accessibility statement. The first of which is just a basic, few lines talking about your commitment. If you use a generator tool, it's going to kind of bake this in and do it for you and sort of ask, what tier of compliance you have. So, you express to the public that you understand how conformant your platform is already. You're going to need an email. And then lastly, a toll-free number. So on the left is an accessibility statement that I created for one of our clients who's a landscaper out in Connecticut, where we're based. And I used the W3C generator tool to make this. So now we're getting on to the code examples. One thing that I was sort of struggling with or juggling the last few months is we redid our website from Next.js to be done in Remix. And I needed to set document titles dynamically. However, I was trained initially through, I guess, the coding bootcamp that I went to use class-based components. So I was looking to use a lifecycle method, a component did mount, if any of you are familiar, in order to do this. But you can't do that with functional components, which most people use. So I am using the use effect hook here. It's sort of hard to see, but reach out to me for the source code if you're interested afterward. And then here are some key points that I compiled from a Remix Conf talk that I really liked. I talked to Adrian about Remix Conf a bit earlier this year. I wasn't able to make it, but someone gave a talk about accessibility. Her name is Catherine Johnson. She's an engineer at Microsoft, and a few of the key points that she gave were sort of why people don't end up getting into this in the first place. It's easy to kind of make a website and just ignore all of this. But some of the barriers would be like funding and also just the uncertainty of the space. You know, some people feel like they might not be able to go deep enough with the personnel that they have on hand. So that's also an issue. The next thing she talked about is setting the tab index equal to 0, which is something that my partner for the event doesn't really believe in as much, but I have an example. He does believe in setting the tab index to 0. He doesn't believe in setting it to -1, which my code example on the right does, but I have a really good reason for that. I'll explain in a moment. The last thing she talked about, which I really liked, is automating scans and also incorporating this into your CI/CD pipeline, which I think is really cool. And if any of you have done this in the audience and want to talk to me about it after, I would love to maybe learn a little bit more about that. But the code snippet I have on the right is from an iframe on our homepage, which basically, like if you tab through our homepage, the iframe was really grabbing the attention. And I felt like if someone was going through this site with a screen reader, they would get distracted and maybe start to interpret the site that we have as a work sample in our iframe as an actual, or as the actual site. So I thought it made sense in this particular case. And here's an example I have of alt text, which anyone who's worked with SEO or just basic HTML is probably familiar with. It's also really good for accessibility. So here's a build that I was doing using WordPress as a headless CMS with Remix on the front end, right? And basically, I added alt text, or alt text comes configured with this plugin called Atlas Content Modeler for the images, right? So basically what I'm doing in the component on the right, you can't really see it because it's kind of cropped, but like I said, I can give you guys the source code, is I was returning the alt text using dot notation, and we're mapping over the collection of paintings for this particular artist's site on the front end. So if this is something you guys are interested in learning how to build, it's like a Remix site that connects to WordPress as a like a data source, let me know. I can do a talk on it. And here's one of the last slides, which just talks about the references that are given the official Remix documentation. The first really speaks to the fact that you want to make your website or your project really have semantic meaning. So initially, in the days of HTML, this wasn't so hard, but I think, with UI libraries, this becomes more and more of a challenge. Next, it talks about the difference between the link and navlink, and it highlights that the navlink uses assistive technology, which is very, very key. And the last note talks about client-side routing. So yeah, here's some of my contact information. Thank you guys for coming out. If you have any questions, just let me know.
All right. Oh, we have multiple mics. We're fancy. So if anybody has any questions, please let us know. We'll bring you the mic so that way all of our friends online can hear as well. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
So individual sites are trying to go for compliance A, AA, AAA. Are you basically saying in those statement of desire facts? Like, are we trying? Is the site actually AAA compliant or AA compliant, or trying to reach AA? I'm trying to think what the right wording is. Maybe my verbiage is a little confused, but
No, I think I get the gist of it.
yeah, it's just like these are standards, but that doesn't mean we don't have regressions, which means we try to get back to them. Does the statements need to have like we will try to, get it back into compliance within X amount of time, that kind of thing?
No, nothing like that. It's not really time sensitive. You just talk about where you are. And I mean, as long as you have contact information and you're able to field questions, you should be all set. You want the WordPress? QR code, okay.
Yeah, just
This
yeah.
is Adrian's presentation. Okay. And there's another question.
Oh, that was me.
Okay.
I'm Daniela Decker. Nice to meet you. Thanks for the
Danielle.
presentation. Full transparency, I'm not a developer, but work very much within this space in a consulting capacity. So one small plug for anybody that's using alt text, there's a great company called Scribely. It's like half a cent for any photo or any PowerPoint. As you were talking about that, it just came to mind. It's a great company. Curious kind of, and I know you didn't touch on this, and I know it's very contentious within the disability community, but things like Userway or the small accessibility buttons in the corner when you see them on websites. I'm curious if you can just give your hot take on how they actually don't provide a lot of accessibility for websites and how they're really often having a negative impact on companies like yours that are doing the right work both in the back end and the front end. But these, I forget what they're called, these hot buttons are really contentious.
Yeah, so you're referring to like the plugins that
Yes,
a
the
lot of
plugins.
people have on their site that allow you to sort of adjust the content. I don't really have a hot take per se. My partner for the event, Chris, does talk about them in his book, and he does say they're not that helpful. I'm not sure if anyone else in the audience has encountered them or has anything that they like to say about them. I think they can be useful for some stuff, but they don't make your site fully AA compliant and usable for people with disabilities.
Yeah, from just what I've heard and encountered, there's been quite a few lawsuits despite the fact that they have the plugins. And so I think it's a challenge when they're saying, this makes a website fully accessible when that's actually not the case, especially for different communities. I think the one other thing I'm curious on with your company in particular is there's quite a few policies coming out, one being the largest, the CVTA, which is the Communications Video and Technology Act, which was just recently passed, hopefully in the next couple of months, with Representative Ishu and Senator Markey. I think there's a lot of discussion on how to keep up with all of these different tech policies that are going to impact websites, are going to impact video technology, alt text, audio description. So when you have a website that's somewhat complex, what do you do for your clients to provide all of that insight and all of that that new forward coming tech? And I think actually this applies in Europe as well. Europe has the EU Accessibility Act, which is making ATMs, banking websites, apps, all mandated to be accessible in the next 3 years. I think it's a challenge to keep up with it all.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think, one of the best opportunities is to just become really well learned as a developer, and it all has to start somewhere, which is why for the audience today, I'm giving this talk. It's not just because I'm interested in the space, but it's because I was recently starting out my journey in learning about it. So I think it's great if individuals can check out Chris's book. He has a really popular article that he wrote about it. But then also just kind of making a game plan, of what you think is worth it and how you're going to stumble upon it. For my clients, what I offer is like just knowledge. I let them know that it's out there and it's available, but it's hard to really give the development support to make, someone's project fully AA compliant, right? But it definitely is of interest to me. So yeah, my company is going to keep growing in this space, and then the clients that are really bullish on it will ideally, reach the AA conformance through us. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi. So basically, while developing websites, one of the common tool that is used is called as Totally to make it accessible. Are you aware of it? Totally, TOTAL 11Y. It's like a tool created by Khan Academy. So it's like any code you have, you just put it there, and it'll show you where you can be more accessible. So when it comes to that, something like that, which is like a freely available tool, how do you compete with that? And do you think that that would be, because it gives a lot of power to the developer itself? Like you don't, like there's no extra necessity to have uh, uh, getting verified whether you are accessible or not, because if while you're coding you can get the answer there is. So how do you compete with that?
Well, I'm not offering a platform to compete with that, but I do think that a tool like that is definitely really viable for anyone in the audience who's a developer. But you want to know like what it's doing, right? Automated scans will let you know what's going wrong in your site, and I think that's key. But like if you're going to use a tool like you called it Totally, I think you want to understand what it's doing for you, if that makes sense. But yeah, you said it's created by Khan Academy. Yeah, so it's probably good, right? Does anyone else have any other questions?
Okay. So for instance, for like video, you might want to have like captions on screen, and for images, alt text. But what are some other considerations someone should have for their site or applications to make it more accessible?
So one consideration I was considering including the presentation, I just took it out because I felt like it made it kind of clunky, was ARIA labels and ARIA text, right? So that was something that I incorporated into my website, my agency website in advance before the event to kind of make my contact form more accessible. So I think that's a great one. Any sort of, I mentioned alt text. I think alt text is great. Having a tab index of 0 on all of your main components throughout the site is advisable for people who are going to be using tab navigation. I mentioned nav links. So nav links are something that we use at like in our builds, whether it be like Next.js or Remix or the equivalent in Next.js. Do they use nav links too? Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you're using something like React Area in your UI components, right? And you also use, say, a ESLint plugin, I guess the A11Y. How far does that get you? And what would be the gaps or things that would be overlooked in trying to cover accessibility with that approach?
So I've never used React Aria before. Is that a library?
So my understanding, it is like UI primitives, and they try to build in, say, the focusing and the key navigation and all that stuff in there. So they explicitly try to handle accessibility for you.
Okay, I understand. So since I haven't used it, it's hard for me to really speak to it. But something like that seems like it would optimize the ARIA labels for your site. Do you already? So have you used it before or no?
What's that?
Have you used React Aria before?
So it was built into, say, Next UI. So underneath it, those components already use it. So I'm just wondering if you're using something like Next UI, which is built on React Area, and then you have an ESLint plugin, just broadly speaking, what would be some of the gaps that would be overlooked by that approach? Given that I'm completely naive to accessibility.
Okay. Yeah, so it's hard for me to tell you because I haven't, I'm not familiar, but I think if I were using it, I would go through and manually check all the ARIA labels throughout my site. And what was the other technology you mentioned?
So there's an ESLint plugin, I think it's called A11Y, that would probably check for ARIA labels.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, it sounds like a good tool. It's ESLint. Okay, all right, awesome. Does anyone else have any questions?
All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again. And yeah, I need 5 mics. Hold on. No more mics. I was kidding. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like as Remix developers, like the the accessibility and the ARIA labels and all of that is just something that has been built in from the beginning. Like even as you were going through like the initial tutorials, they're like, make sure you fill this out. You just do it now and you won't have to worry about it later. So I love this. Okay. No. All right, let's go back to this slide. So next we have Accessibility Matters with Wayne Jones. So Wayne is going to come up and set up, and I have some things to say about him while he does that, but they're in my notes. So there's this. Okay. So Wayne Jones is a web developer born and raised in New York. He has a background as a full stack developer working and building websites with JavaScript and React. When he's not coding, he's volunteering and organizes events for Creators NYC, a content creator photographer meetup, as well as NYC Gamers, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to creating safer spaces for the LGBTQ plus communities. How you doing? Did I read it too fast? Okay. So Wayne Jones, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone. All right, so this is my talk, Accessibility Matters, Why Every Web Developer Should Prioritize Accessibility. Give me 1 second. Okay. So this is me. I'm Wayne Jones. I'm a software engineer, aspiring developer advocate, currently at insert company here, which means I'm currently looking for my next role. So if your company is looking for a software engineer that's with over 9 years of experience leading your team in JavaScript, React, you can reach me at my LinkedIn and GitHub at Wayne Jones in terms of username. I'm also on Twitter and Threads as Wayne of Life. And I also have a Twitch channel where I stream games, but I also stream myself coding from time to time. Yeah, thank you. And I just want to preface, this talk isn't by any means an exhaustive list on accessibility, but I do want to have a few key takeaways from this talk. We're going to be talking about the best practices for accessibility in the web, some common web accessibility mistakes, how accessibility can fit within your current workflow, and links to more resources on web accessibility. So let's talk why accessibility is important. So inaccessible websites exclude people just as much as stairs at a physical location. In a way, excluding a person digitally is in a way a form of discrimination. In addition, in the United States, companies can be held liable for failing to create an accessible website due to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So American with Disabilities Act, or ADA for short, is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in everyday activities. The ADA applies to both state and local governments, also known as Title II, and as well as businesses that are open to the public, known as Title III. While not specifically mentioning websites in the legislation, because this is like way back in 1990, through court precedents, this act is assumed to extend beyond the physical space of businesses and governments, which would mean digital spaces, including websites. And also, have you heard in the previous talk, there's been an increasing number of Title III lawsuits over the years. And this is a live look at companies actively wasting money on lawsuits each and every year due to accessibility issues. So let's talk facts. According to the 2021 American Community Survey, out of an estimated 320 million people in the US, about 42 million people live with disabilities. And out of that 42 million people with disabilities, around 11 million people, or 3.6% of the population, live with visual impairments, while 8 million people, or 2.5 of the population, live with hearing impairments. Wait, going down here. In WebAIM's screen reader user survey in 2021, of those surveyed, 92.3% of respondents say they use a screen reader due to the disability. There's been an increasing trend of screen reader usage on mobile devices. As you can see from the chart here, it increased from 67% in 2010. This is like right when I think iPhone just came out, or this is probably iPhone 3G or 4. And it increased to like 90% in 2021. And in terms of screen reader use, on desktop, popular screen readers include JAWS, NVDA, followed by VoiceOver. And on mobile devices, VoiceOver was the most popular and heavily used, followed by TalkBack and Voice Assistant. Now, let's talk about some common barriers for accessibility. These right here, these 4 different topics are common, I would say common barriers, but also I would say excuses on why not to include accessibility within your project or within your coding workflow. So time to market, because it's a race to develop a fast and viable working product, accessibility is like the last thing on their minds. Knowing how to test. One common complaint is that developers don't know how to test for accessibility using assistive readers or tools. The time it takes to test. Another complaint is that companies say that it takes a while to build for accessibility, but if you build a website with accessibility in mind, it won't take up any more time to develop. Let me repeat that. If you build a website with accessibility in mind, it won't take up any more time to develop. And then lastly, the last excuse is why improve on things that you can't see? Just because you can't visually see the changes doesn't mean that it wouldn't impact the web experience for others. And so I'm going to pose a question out to you guys. How many of you heard from your manager, your company, one of these 4 reasons on why they can't include accessibility? Just show of hands. So I'm assuming all you guys do accessibility at your work job? Okay. All right. But let's go over some common ways and sort of common mistakes for developers when it comes to accessibility. So semantic HTML. Some semantic elements can be used to describe different parts of a web page. And for screen reader users, using semantic elements on the browser for screen reader users, using semantic elements, the browser can clearly articulate to the user what HTML element they're on. If it's a heading, they can navigate by headings. If it's a list item, it can clearly describe how many items are in that list. So for example, some semantic elements include header, footer, nav, and main, whereas some non-semantic elements, and you probably heard this all before, div and span, are not all that semantic and not all that accessible. So we're going to do a little bit more interactivity, right? So let's say you have a website page that is a recipe. Hopefully everybody can see this, right? You can see the code? Yes, I'll take that as yes. All right, let's say you have a website page that is a recipe on how to cook for introverts, such as myself. And you mock up the template. If you mock up this template like so, does anybody here know what's wrong with this markup? Yes. Okay. Let's go. Yes, you. Yeah, that is correct. And so this accessibility issue is known as incorrect heading order. you can also have a case where heading levels are also skipped. So in order to resolve this type of issue, and I think you sort of alluding to it, you would need to have the heading orders go in the correct place. So with HTML, the heading orders go from H1 down to H6. In this case, adding an H2 right before our H3 fixes the issue of incorrect heading order. And in terms of heading order, it sort of have a sort of cascading effect. So you can sort of have different levels, as I think you were mentioning before, with headings, where you can have an H2 and then an H3, and then you can also go back to an H2. But essentially, that's the premise. So going off that same web page example, there may be cases where heading level and styling are tightly coupled. And so in this example, H2 has a font family, font size, and font weight attached to it. In addition, there's no H1 markup on this page. Because let's say the styling of the H1 doesn't fit the look that you're going for. Just wanted to point out that unfortunately not having an H1 on a web page is an accessibility issue. In addition, having too many H1s is also an accessibility issue. So in order to resolve this issue, one way to go about it is to have a screen reader only class where it's visually hidden from the user, but it's still readable for screen readers. A more helpful tip is to not have heading level and styling tightly coupled together. So then you'd be able to use heading levels without the discrepancy on styling. So in this case, H1 has a class of SR only, and this is sort of the CSS markup for visually hiding headings or any text, but still be available to the screen readers. And then with H2, we have a class here of big text where our the CSS class of big text has the same styling properties as before, but this allows use of our class big text anywhere. So our headings aren't really as tightly coupled as before. So now let's say you have a form on a web page where you enter your name and submit the form. Here's the markup for the form. Can anybody point out what's missing with this markup? No label. Yes, exactly. No labels. So form inputs such as text field, radio checkboxes require labels for accessibility. To correctly attach a label to input field, the input field must have an ID field. In this case, it's an ID field with the name input field. And the label has a for attribute matching that same ID name. You could also wrap it. Yeah, but I guess typically you also can do it like this. But yeah. And then for this markup, there's a link that says click here. Oh, did I skip this? All right. I'm on the right page. Okay. For this markup, there's a link that says click here, which is surrounded by an anchor tag. I know some developers that start off might code a navigation or a link like this way. But unfortunately, this is also accessibility issue known as links that don't have descriptive text. So when screen readers actually read this link, it will say the text of the link. So having a text like click here doesn't really tell the user exactly where the link navigates to. And so it's better to have a more descriptive text to better describe the navigation. So for example, in order to resolve this issue, we change click here to Google. Maybe actually it could be a little bit better in terms of descriptive text, but Google suffice in order to tell the user accurately where this link navigates to. So now we're going over to alt text for images. So alt text, you don't really need to add an alt text for all images, but only on images that provide context to the content or images that have text within it. While having alt text on images can improve search ranking, there are cases where companies use alt text to stuff keywords for SEO purposes. So in this example, it's an image of Steve Jobs, and the alt tag here is used to stuff additional keywords, such as iPhone, iMac, iPad, Mac, and so, which is an incorrect use of alt tag. So a question to you guys, what is a good example of a correct alt tag that can be used in this place? One person at a time. But yeah, I think I've heard from a few. And so something like Apple CEO founder Steve Jobs is holding the iPhone 4, which accurately describes what the image is, and it provides context. Also, if there's text within an image, if the text is relevant to the content of the page, that should also have an alt attribute for that image. Now let's go to keyboard navigation. The ability to navigate the web by keyboard is vital to people with disabilities. It is even more imperative that they are able to navigate it via keyboard tabbable functionality in a seamless way. WebAIM has a nice guide on how to test for keyboard accessibility that I can provide at the end of this talk. So, there could be instances where display of content is different from the source code or tab navigation, which could confuse people who navigate via keyboard. Here are some examples on ways to reorder content in CSS using both Flexbox's flex direction and the order property in CSS. And so with this HTML markup, you have a class of box followed by 3 div children with links that says 1, 2, and 3. This is the output ordering using the styling from the last slide. So now if I try to navigate through the divs by tabbing, you can see there's an outline, meaning a border. When I try to go to the first focusable element, it jumps down to the link that has 1 as the text. If I tab again, it jumps up to the link that says 2. And I tab again, it jumps up to the link that says 3. And so this could be very confusing for keyboard users because you can have an instance where you try to tab through a website and it's jumping all over the page. It can jump from the bottom to the top, back to the bottom. So it's very, 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 very confusing. Just last thing about this, it's probably best to not use the order property or flex direction. I would say your best thing would be to sort of have the content in the correct order that you want it to sort of be able to navigate to. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you don't necessarily have to use the order property or flex direction because it creates chaos when it comes for keyboard users. So making non-interactive elements keyboard focusable. So I think you mentioned in the last talk about tab index. For me, I don't see an instance where you're making a div that is now tab focusable. By default, links, buttons, and form controls are natively accessible for keyboard users. In my opinion, it's best to avoid tab index whenever possible. Use links, buttons, or form controls for interactivity. So color contrast. For visual impaired users, having the correct color contrast on websites is vital in order for them to see the content visibly. So let me show you a little bit of the WebAIM's contrast checker, which I use on a daily basis to sort of check. Hopefully you're able to see. Maybe I gotta zoom out. That's good. All right. So in this case, you can enter a hexadecimal code for your foreground color. This will probably just be your text color. And then you have a background color would be the background of your web page or application. So for example, if I type in black, it has a contrast ratio of 21:1, and it passes all of our tests for WCAG, AA, and AAA. But let's say, going back, if we go back to blue, it has a little bit worse contrast ratio, 8.5:1, but it still passes our accessibility standards. Now, let's say you try to, let's say you want green, for example. That contrast ratio is now 1.37:1, and it fails all of our accessibility standards. So this is a great tool. This is called WebAIM Contrast Checker if you're trying to test for contrast accessibility. But yeah, as I mentioned, you want to aim for WCAG AA compliance for both normal and large text. Ideally, you'd want AAA compliance. For multimedia accessibility, for multimedia such as videos, it's generally good practice to have captions, subtitles for videos. And so in this markup, we use a built-in video element, which has two source elements for video, which you can switch between an MP4 version of a file and a WebM compressed version. It also has a track element where we can load our VTT file, which is essentially your subtitle file for transcription. If you're using iframes or embeds from videos such as YouTube or Vimeo, you can utilize the built-in captioning system to make sure your video is accessible. And so there are other ways to make multimedia videos accessible. I believe there was a question before earlier about this. Other ways you can make it accessible through sign language, adding sign language so that deaf folks can get content in their native language. Description of visual information provides descriptions so that people who are blind and others who cannot see the video adequately can get the visual information needed to understand the content. Providing a transcript is a text version of speech and non-speech audio information. Descriptive transcripts would ideally provide text descriptions of the visual information. And then accessible players using accessible video players such as Able Player would do most of the heavy lifting so that developers don't have to use customized solutions to make a player accessible. And I just wanted to note with Able Player, I would say it's probably the most accessible player out there, but it's not 100% accessible, as any accessible libraries would tout. But I would say it would do most of the job for you when it comes to accessibility. In addition, there are some semi-automated solutions that would catch common accessibility issues. Here are some examples that I use in my developer workflow. You as a developer would still have to test manually, as this is not an end-all, be-all solution. And so in conclusion, testing for accessibility isn't hard, and you shouldn't add more development time if done correctly the first time. And so I hope with this talk, you're able to take something from this and able to incorporate accessibility within your workflow. And so this QR code here will point to more accessibility resources that I presented in my slide. some accessibility resources when it comes to government accessibility, Section 508, the WCAG standards for 2.1 and 2.2, and all the libraries that I use for accessibility. And yeah, and I just wanted to point out, this is my socials. Feel free to hit me up. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Yes. Do we have any questions for Wayne? Dun, dun, dun. We got Quentin on the mics.
Oh, y'all had all the questions before. Were y'all?
Yeah. Oh, do we have somebody? All right.
Y'all didn't save any questions for me?
Yeah, one thing crossed my mind that I was thinking about. So we know that we can do like code generation with large language models and stuff. Mm-hmm. How good are they at producing accessible code?
Whew. If you're on Twitter, this week, accessibility Twitter, tech Twitter has been going off. So there's this library called VO or V0 that claims to produce production-ready code. Similar to like you put it in a prompt, it produces the code for you. But we come to find out that through some like accessibility advocates, find out that that code that they produce is not accessible at all. I know it's still an alpha build and maybe it can improve on time, but like, I guess to answer your question, I don't think AI is going to get 100% the way there when it comes to accessibility. And you still would have to manually test both visually and code through static checkers or linters to ensure that your code is 100% accessible.
Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, we got one here.
Yeah. So the linters, how far do they get you? What are the gaps if you're lint clean?
Yeah. So let me go back to the libraries. So what I use JSX A11Y. This is for React specifically. And in addition with that, combined with Axe-Core, it only gets you around, according to Axe, gets you around like 60% of the way there, which is not 100% that you're aiming for. But yeah, like if you use a combination of these tools, including WebAIM Wave, Lighthouse, the linters, I think you can get somewhere it's like close to 100%, if not 100%. But yeah, in terms of like automated, there's not really an automated way of doing things. I mean, you could use Sauce Labs or Ghost Inspector, but you have to set up the test for accessibility. So you still have to go through that and still have to actively test it. But there's no really one tool that can figure out what accessibility issues that are out there. So, and can solve it. So, yeah.
What would you say the most common thing that's missed by developers for the web, like accessibility wise?
Accessibility wise, empty buttons, like not having text within buttons is a thing, especially when you're building modals. With the close button, typically they'll have like styling where you use the before parameters to style it. And so there's no real text within the buttons. So that's one common thing. Another thing is empty links as well. Sometimes you put an image within a link and that image might not have an alt tag. And so when a screen reader goes to that link, it's like, I don't know what this is. So that's another common accessibility issue as well that I've seen.
How do you go about fixing like the button or the link? I think that the link, you said if it's an image, you put in the alt tag and that's fine. But what about button?
Yeah, the button. as I mentioned before, my previous slide, you have such a thing as a screen reader only class. So you can have a screen reader only class. I don't know where it's at, but it's somewhere there. There's a screen reader only class that allows the screen reader to read whatever text that's in the button, but it won't be visually shown to the user. So that's one way of resolving that type of issue.
So like putting the description in like a span and then marking that span as SR only?
Yeah, it could do that.
I often, well, first of all, thanks for the great presentation. Just run into accessibility questions that I can't get answered on MDN. Maybe a recent one was just like, does a form need an ARIA label? Or sometimes I have a weird control and I don't know how to mark it up. So are there good like forums or discords where I can just ask an accessibility question like, how do I mark this up?
I'm just gonna sort of shout out A11Y NYC. They have meetups, I think every month. So that's one way if you're looking for a group. I think there's a few accessibility groups on Discord and Slack, but I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, there are definitely like groups out there that you can go to ask questions for accessibility. Twitter is also another thing. Accessibility Twitter is very, very helpful. So you can always pose a question on there as well. I don't know why I'm on LinkedIn. Hey. Okay.
We got another one coming up.
Cool.
Run, Quentin, run.
Got another question. Cool.
So it's not a question. It was just to the point that you made. What would be the common thing? Mm-hmm. So I read recently that if you want to italicize something or make something bold, we use the B and the I tags, but HTML5 has. So now we have to use strong and emphasis. So even that is an accessibility issue. A lot of legacy sites still have the I and the B as tags. So that is also one major thing.
And yeah, I think there was going back to the other question regarding ARIA labels. For me personally, I would only use ARIA labels whenever I would say whenever there's like a need for it. Forums, links, all are semantic elements that can be clearly read from the screen reader. So you don't need an ARIA label for those. If you're building out components that has divs, then maybe you might need an ARIA label. But I would say refrain from using divs and just use semantic elements. So you don't need to use ARIA labels.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the subject of headings real quick because I feel like I'm not super clear on it. So what I had been reading about for like, you know, I try to go as far as I can with like semantic HTML and like structuring content as such. How does one properly use H1 tags, section tags, and the subheading tags together? Because from what I understand, if you usually should chunk your content by section, and those sections should have headings. So I guess, how do you conceptualize when to use the section tag? Because like, you know, you could have a section that has just an H2 in it and some content. Mm-hmm. But I would say probably then if you had an H3 right after that was relevant to that H2, it should go in the same section tag, right? Is that how that works generally?
Yeah, if you have an H3 that's relevant to that prior H2, then it would go like right under. Mm-hmm. So like for example, let me open up a new file or something. I don't know. Say a VS Code, and you have, of course, on every page you have an H1. Mm-hmm.
A long H1.
I don't know why. Maybe I can specify. I just print it out. I just want some lore and some, not the whole paragraph. But you have an H1, right? And so from that, you have an H2. That's, let's say, give me a topic.
Like foods. let's say.
Foods. Okay. Right. So you have an H2. Technically, just visualize it like this. Any H3, let's say broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, H3 apples, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're gonna have an H4. Under apples, Granny Smith.
Fire.
Fuji. So it's kind of like in this process. If you go back to H3, we're still under foods. So it will still be like, I don't know, peas.
Oranges, yeah, okay.
And then H2 will be like your next topic, such as like, I don't know, kitchen tools. So it sort of goes like this in terms of this process. So think of it like hierarchy wise, such as I should put tab with this H2. But yeah, so it should go something like this.
So my question is, going off of that, like from what I've learned over time is I would want to find some way based on the page to section content with the section tag in particular based on HTML5 to organize my content. And I guess I'm wondering if there's some kind of like best practice around using the section tag in particular relative to headings.
Sections, from what I know, I think sections is similar to like, it's kind of like, if you're using sections, it's kind of like a wrapper, I would say. So in the case with this example, you would sort of wrap section around your H2. And that'll be one section. And then your second part will be kitchen. But I don't think necessarily you need to use it unless like it's clear. Like I guess if it's clearly defined sections. But I was like with the headings itself, like for accessibility wise, it's not necessarily necessary to have the section like surrounding as a wrapper. Like users will be able to navigate through that through the headings.
I get, so in the past, I'm sorry if I'm getting too into, you can cut me off whenever.
No, go ahead.
So when I look into like HTML outlines to, you know, like to actually see what the content structure looks like, the section tag seems to come up a lot as like important for chunking content into relevant sections with headers and content that follows said headers. So it's like for associating headings with paragraphs a lot of the time, from what I understand, unless I get that wrong.
For associating headings with
content. So if there were p tags, for example, paragraph tags in this example,
within this,
yeah, like wrapping it in such a way to include the relevant paragraph tags with the heading tags helps with the HTML outline, so that there's a clear outline structure for screen readers. Was my understanding of the section tag.
Gotcha. Yeah,
that's how I use it, at least. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say like when I use section, I wrap it around headings, but I don't know. I have to look into more because I don't use sections that much.
It confused me a lot, which is why I wanted to ask, like, you, because it's like mad confusing. And I wasn't sure how to do it when I was learning semantic HTML, because, you know, it helps with accessibility and all that jazz. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm a bit. Can I do the next talk on just the section tag? Okay. Thank you.
All right, you all heard it. The next talk is going to be on just the section tag.
Section tag for accessibility.
Oh, do we have? Oh, they just popped up. See the section tag? It just brings all the questions out. Here we go.
I just wanted to shout out there's a library called React Headings where you just put an H tag and it'll automatically increment. And to your question, it exports a section component, but that doesn't emit a section tag. It just does the auto incrementing H.
Wait, you said that's a plugin for VS Code?
NPM package React Headings, it just gives you an H tag and then it'll auto increment.
Oh, automatically increment. Oh, okay. So that's like a component. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So like you talked about how semantic tags help with accessibility. So I was wondering when a developer uses frameworks like Material UI or Tailwind CSS or anything like that, so they have some components, but they built it, right? So how like does it do it automatically for the developer, like with the tags that they give you, or do you have to specify it? Like if you're using Material UI, there is a nav component or something like that. So will you have to specify like what the semantics should be for the page in that thing?
So when it comes to design system tools like Material UI, Chakra, like all those out there, when they build out their components, I hope they build their components with accessibility in mind. I haven't tested it myself to know which ones are fully accessible, which ones are not. I would suggest if you are using design systems like that to test it yourself just in case, like after the fact. Don't necessarily rely on if they say it's fully accessible. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Cool.
Nope.
Sorry. So just to clarify, I think if you're using any header outside of any section, you can put it in another semantic HTML tag, which is called as main. So first we bifurcate into main article and we build the grid structure. Then we want to give the heading. So we can, in the main, we can define a H1, H2 based on our, and even if there is a paragraph, the understanding will be that that is a part of main. And then in that main, you can define other sections like section X.
Yeah. So we need to wrap up this. I love the conversation, and like this is just feeding, the talk that you're going to give on the section tag, and I'm just on pins and needles waiting for it. But I want to thank Wayne Jones again for giving this talk.
And I just want to stress, you can, I guess, take a picture of the QR code here. It'll lead you to a gist of accessibility resources, the guides and libraries, and some more resources that I mentioned for your information. So feel free to use that.
All right. Dun, 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 dun. Here we come. Oh, wait, I need that.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it back. All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, it's still on. Okay. Again, thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Dylan. This has been our September meetup. We hope to see everyone next month when, who knows, section tags. I mean, the CFP is open. So if you'd like to talk about anything, please, you can find that link on the meetup page. But thank you all for coming. We can go ahead and stop the live stream. We're so fancy.